To my friend Nate and all the listeners of this podcast, no one circles the wagons than Nate Discate. Circle the wagons, Buffalo.
Where else would you rather be than right here, right now?
Hey, hey, let's go Buffalo! Hey, hey, let's go Buffalo!
The Bills make me wanna shout.
Welcome to the Circling the Wagons podcast, a podcast discussing the Bills all year round with interviews, news, recaps, and insightful fan discussion. Here's your host and lifelong Bills fan, Nate.
Hey Bills Mafia, welcome to a very, very special episode of Circling the Wagons, where we had the pleasure of interviewing Chris Berman, aka Boomer, aka the Swami. On this episode, we talked to him about everything, his career, how he coined the phrase circling the wagons, how he comes up with all the nicknames that he uses week in and week out, where he started that from, his affinity for Buffalo, where that came from, and a ton of different other topics, including his outlook on the Bills-Jets game in the season opener and his outlook on the Bills season in general. This was truly a bucket list item for myself, the ability to interview an icon in the Buffalo Bills sports fandom. I mean, he's basically came up with the namesake for the podcast. So that was a ton of fun. Before we get into it, just want to mention that this episode is brought to you by the Twin Spires Sportsbook at Del Lago. If you're in the Western New York or Central New York area, do yourselves a favor. Head on down the thruway on Route 90, get off at Exit 41, and check out the Del Lago Resort and Casino, where every moment is a winning moment. So without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Chris Berman.
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.
Hello?
Is this Nate?
Yes. Is this Chris Berman?
This is B. How are you?
I am doing excellent. How are you doing, sir?
Sorry to be a little late. Well, listen, the whole show is called Circling the Wagons. Say no more. I love it. Where are you, Rochester?
Yep, I'm in the Rochester area. Yep, I went to school at UB, but I live in Rochester now.
Right. Well, it's Bills country, and you're you have one of those hats and the water buffaloes.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
they're classic, aren't they?
Oh my goodness, they're amazing. Okay, great. I'm just gonna give you a quick intro, if that's all right.
Nate, it's up to you. Yep, go for it.
You're the best. He is a 6-time National Sportscaster of the Year. He is arguably the face of ESPN as an anchor there for over 40 years. He is the host of the fastest 3 minutes in sports and of SportsCenter. He's the host of NFL Primetime on ESPN, and he presented Buffalo Bills owner Ralph Wilson Jr. at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2009. I'd like to welcome Chris Berman to the Circling the Wagons podcast. Boomer, it is so good to talk to you. How are you?
Hi, Nate. Listen, any podcast that calls itself Circling the Wagons, which I do know where that came from, I'm honored to be a guest, and I guess a football nickname for you. It's tough to say it, but Nate Audible. Right? That would be your nickname. I mean, that would be what Josh Allen does at the line. So there you go. You are now nicknamed.
That's awesome. I feel like that's a bucket list item. I can cross that off right now. Getting a nickname from Boomer is pretty amazing. I actually wanted to ask you about that because, as you know, you just mentioned this is the podcast namesake. This was something that just so happened to come about. It ended up being perfect. It fit our name, fit the team perfectly. When you came up with the phrase "Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills," now obviously I know that like the term "circle the wagons" existed, but I don't think it was part of the vernacular like it is now. How did you come up with that? And could you tell me the story of that?
Well, I wish I had a great story to say it was at such and such a game, because I've been asked this before, and I'm sure if we went back to the archives, I could find the first time that I said it on primetime. It would have been early 90s, because it was the rise of the Bills, but of course they got really good in 88, but I wouldn't have been saying it then, and then 89. So it would have been somewhere maybe the 90 or the 91 season, but I wish I had the game. I don't. And why did I say it's because it looked bleak. It wasn't the Frank Reich comeback game, but that, of course, that then cemented, epoxied, so any time after the playoff comeback against Houston from 35-3 in 92, that wasn't the first time I used it. I don't think I used it a lot, but I think we hit it, that was like the old, we used a destroyer to get rid of a mosquito. I think however a heavy hammer, I hammered it deep, and no game, of course, made more sense to do it than that. It wasn't the first. I don't know what the first, but again, to repeat, any time they came back and I was doing a highlight and that team of the 90s, they would classic Circle the Wagons. And then, of course, that just became a rallying cry for Bills fans. And then there were many years when the Wagons lost a couple of wheels, right? But those teams of the 90s, 88 through 90s, that was certainly it. I wish I could say it was the 35-3 comeback. It wasn't, but that essentially cemented it in history.
But that's when it popularized, right? After that game, it became kind of a staple out there. I mean, you have so many. I mean, you just gave me a nickname off the cuff, Chris, and you've been known for nicknames all throughout your career. One of my favorites, and of course this is, growing up as a kid, I loved, the fastest 3 minutes in sports is probably one of my favorite segments. I was able to convince my parents to let me stay up to watch it because, I might have been in elementary school or whatever at the time. And you use names like the Terminator, Squirmin' Thurman Thomas. How did you come up with those? Was it just off the cuff like you did just now? Or I picture you maybe in a lab at ESPN HQ just cooking up some nicknames like that.
Well, we at college, when there wasn't any. I'm 68 years old, so Nate, in the 70s, whatever I can remember us looking at box scores of baseball from games 2 days. The West Coast games ended Tuesday night. The Thursday newspaper, we'd find out who did what in the Giants-Dodgers game, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So it really started with baseball. And I remember some of these nicknames we'd be having, maybe a beer or two, and they would come out. Now, fast forward, my first year at ESPN I was there. We began September 7th, 1979, so we're around that time, and I was 24. It wasn't my very first job, but essentially for TV, it just about was. And I did the overnight show in the early days because I was the junior member by far. And 1980 baseball season, a couple of them just came out at 2:30 in the morning. Not a plan, honest. You plan to be funny, A, you're not funny, B, it's not going to work. A couple of them that go back to my college days, were only a few years before, I might add. So it was either, there was a pitcher named Frank Tanana, a really good pitcher. We called him Frank Tanana Daiquiri. It was either him or John Mayberry was a slugger for Kansas City and then Toronto. Called the Mayberry RFD after Andy Griffith and the TV show and et cetera. And a couple of them came out and it was an accident, honest. And 2:30, 2:45 in the morning, you're a little giddy, even if that's your, quote, work hour. And so what happened as an accident became almost a second mini career. I became a farmer of these things, and I think I've used over 1,000 of them. I used to get lists from viewers back then in the 80s suggesting if I laughed at them, I used them. None of them are derogatory. And so, do I sit and sleep with the rosters? No, that's how rumors start. But I might look at a name like I looked at yours, knowing that I was going to do this today. And Nate Audible, okay, well, Audible. It looks like let's just go with it. And if it's there in 20 seconds and it's okay, I'll go with it. If it's not, it's not. And I'm not saying I'm smarter than anyone else, but long before I was born, in baseball, Babe Ruth, I need to say no more, right? Willie Mays to say, hey, kid, we could go on. And so it was just kind of a fun way to make a lot of the games weren't on TV then, Nate. It's hard for you to imagine that in the 80s you might get 2 Kansas City Royal games a week on TV, and so a lot of times we'd have 5-2 up there on the screen for 45 seconds. Well, you'd throw out a nickname like John Mayberry RFD, and it kind of worked, and I wasn't upsetting anybody, and believe me, it was an accident that worked, but it was a game that everyone can play. You can sit at home and come up with your own. So Thermal, I called him Thermal Thomas. Had he been playing for Miami, I never would have used it. But in Buffalo, that would be Thermal Thomas. Steve Christie, I used to sing, the kicker of the Bills back in the day. There was a singer named Lou Christie, I'm dating myself, who had a big hit called Lightning Striking Again, and I used to use that. Jim was already Jim Kelly. With Don Beebe, I mean, again, this is going way back. I mean, I still do him now, obviously. Don Beebe, he was so fast, I would do it like beep, 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 like a like a Pac-Man game, which again is long since expired. But remember, my heyday of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, that was kind of, you're on every night and you're just doing it. And it's sports. It's fun. We're not reporting a serious news story, and if there is a serious news story, you certainly aren't using a nickname,
Yeah, I think it's one of the many things that sets you apart as a sportscaster, as an icon. I don't know if I've heard of any of your recent nicknames for Buffalo Bills players. One of the things, and it wasn't on purpose, that we like to do on the podcast is come up with, nicknames for players. Like, we've come up with so many. Like Matt Milano, right? I mean, the easy one is Matt Milano Cookie, but like there's Matt.
Oh, they're good cookies.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. There's like Matty the Marauder, Matt the Missile. Like there's a lot of like cool nicknames to be had out there. Do you have any favorite nicknames for this current Bills roster?
Well, what I'm doing right now, and I thought I had. Wait a minute. How can I will pull out. I have all the rosters here, and I'm trying to. Josh doesn't have one. I mean, he's already here. It's Buffalo Bills. Let me just look for a second here. I'm doing this on the fly.
Yeah, no worries.
Well, for Stefan Diggs, I mean, I do it on primetime. How you digs me now,
Yeah.
That's more not a nickname, but it's a thing.
Yep.
Dawson Knox. Hard Knocks? That's too easy. Again, now you got me. I will probably cook
one
up
thing
this month for Dalton Kincaid.
I have one for Knox. If you don't have to use it, but I have one.
Go ahead.
The Juggernauts, like the Juggernaut. Like
that's very good.
He just
Juggernaut.
Yeah. I mean,
I might steal it and give you credit. My man, Audible. James Cook, but any Cook, which I've used through the years, would be short order or something to that effect. I'm just looking at the starters here.
Yep.
Ed Oliver, what do I use? Milano, we all ate those cookies at 12 years old.
Oh, yeah.
They're great. So maybe, I haven't used that, but I could. I think of it with it. Dr. Jekyll and Micah Hyde, that's kind of a layup.
It's a good one.
I need to work on it. Tyler Bass, when he kicks it, if it's when he's swimming upstream, that kind of stuff.
Kick some. One thing I use. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Dumb and Dumber, Chris. But kick some ass T-Bass. I know you can't say ass probably on ESPN.
It's a family show. Cable,
Exactly.
So there are others. I'm just looking. I'm probably going through this roster too fast. There was an old song, but it's Epinesa, not Epinesa. But when he makes a play at Christmas time, it's always he played Epinesa Scrooge to let's say they're playing the Jets, right? So that's actually he's very good at holiday, like Kyle Rudolph used to be. Very important holiday nickname,
Oh yeah.
And always good at the holidays. So I'll work on some more, but I like it. Knox, that's a good one.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One thing my co-host came up with was Captain Cook for James Cook, but that's more of a historical reference. And I do.
No, it's good. I should. We'll see.
I like the
My
short
point
order
is,
chef,
it's
though.
a game everyone can play, and here's the beauty of it: you don't have to know that James Cook is a running back.
No.
Captain Cook, if you heard of him, all the Pacific, Hawaii, all sorts of places. The best one ever, my favorite, was probably Bert Blyleven, who's a Hall of Fame pitcher. Bert Be Home Blyleven. Now, the reason that works is you don't have to know that he's a pitcher. You don't have to know who he played for. You don't have to know that he had one of the great curveballs of all time. All you have to know is, are you a kid? Did your father or mother ever say, Be Home Blyleven? Are you a parent? Did you ever tell your kids, Be Home Blyleven? That's when they work, when it's a movie or a food or a song, or in Thermal's case, running in December or January at the stadium and through snow piles, then it works even more. Again, you don't have to really know much about it except it applies or you get it, So that's my basis for doing them, Nate.
Yeah, I mean, again, one of the many incredible things that you've done over your career and you continue to do. I got to ask you about your relationship with the Buffalo Bills and the city of Buffalo, because right now it spans decades at this point, and it feels like you were one of the first on a national stage that showed affinity towards our team and our town. Like others out there within the national media, like Wolf Blitzer and the late Tim Russert, I mean, they showed their love to the Bills as well, but they're from here, and you're not. How did it all come about?
Well, I started going to football games as a young boy when Dad was season tickets to the Jets at Shea Stadium with Joe Namath, okay? So that's the AFL. So I always had an affinity for, there were only 8 teams in the beginning. Miami was the 9th. For those 8 teams, I don't like them, I always pulled for them, and the ones other than the Jets of those days, and I'm happy when the Jets do well, but they're not the main anymore, but I'm happy my dad, who would have been 99, he's gone. I'm happy knowing that he would have been happy if the Jets win a game. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But the first champion that I remember in 1964 at 9 years old, and 1965 when I was 10 years old, were the Buffalo Bills. So as a young kid, they're like the best of our little league. So there was always something about Buffalo, especially since their fans would come to the games and sit in the upper deck at Shea Stadium and chant, "Let's go Buffalo," with these cowbells. And I said, my God, my father goes, they drove 7 hours just to be here. And it was okay. So I had a soft spot in my heart from way back as an elementary schooler to Buffalo. Now, fast forward 88, about the days when I used to go to 10 or 12 camps, not all of them. And let me, reiterate that I am no Bill Polian, Marv Levy, Sean McDonough, Brandon Bean. I can't go to a practice in a day and tell you that I see 1/20th of what they see, right? But the Bills at Fredonia were the 12th of 12 that I went to in about a 16-day span. And I sat and watched that practice, and I went, they haven't had a winning season in like 10 years. They look pretty good to me. There's Jim Kelly, we knew who he was, firing the ball. And Bruce Smith was the number 1 pick, and so on and so forth. I made the big trade a half a year ago for Cornelius Bennett. He's a hell of a player. And Fred Smirlis was still playing, friend of mine. And they look pretty good to me. And that year, I didn't really have an AFC team to predict for whatever reason. I can't remember the specifics. And I went, I'm going to pick Buffalo for the Super Bowl. And everybody, what are you, out of your mind? They were almost 500 the year before, which to them was their best year in about 8 years. And I'm going with them. Well, they started 4-0. And they made it to the AFC Championship game, as the older listeners know, or Bills fans know, and they lost to the Bengals. But that's not the point. The point was, and I didn't know it, I was just doing a sports thing. I didn't know a very good friend of mine from Buffalo at Brown, so I had a little affinity in modern time, like getting what the people were like. But I didn't know that, every national sportscaster or anybody, most everyone knows there who wants to go there, right? I didn't really think of it as, I'm going to endear myself to the Buffalo or Rochester or Western New York folk. I picked them, and the Bills made me look good. Okay, I could have picked them, and they could have been 3-13, but they weren't. They were 12-4, and I came up to do a piece the week of the first playoff game, I believe. And when we left to go to the plane, there's Bill Polian and either the mayor or the number one alderman. I don't remember at the time. Wait a minute, there's some commotion at the airport. My God, I'm going to miss my flight to Hartford at 7:30. No, they had a ceremony with cameras set up for me. They wanted to give me the key to the city. So what is this for? Well, you've showed love in Buffalo, and we want to show it back. My God. I mean, I didn't do it for that reason. And so the team made me look good, and then the city was just so happy that they had a national voice behind their beloved Bills, and I always like the underdog teams anyway. And that's really how it happened. It's a longer answer than you wanted, but so to this day, I remain very close with so many on that team, starting with Jim Kelly, one of my best buddies. And they've given me the key to the, I think I have the front door, the back door, and the garage door open by now. And I get it. I get what Buffalo and Western New York is. I totally respect it and the people of it. And I didn't know that I was being loyal to you all, but you guys have been loyal like 20 times over back to me. And it was all because of the Buffalo Bills. And I took a chance, but really, take a chance at what? This is a prediction for football. And the city and the team embraced me. And in my professional career of 40, or my ESPN career of 44 years now, it's been the most organic, I say organic with the nicknames, it's been the most organic. I will take it to my grave how kind and the relationship that I've established, or that was established for me by everybody in Western New York. It's just, I never look to do it. I hold it as high as I can, anything relationship that I've made professionally. It's really been an honor to, quote, represent the Buffalo Bills and Western New York.
That's really incredible to hear, Chris. I mean, I know that, we feel that way, but it's great to hear that you feel the same way back, and that it's everything we kind of hope to be. Just like when Josh Allen says he wants nothing more than win a Super Bowl. To hear it, we always think that, and then when you hear him say it, it means so much more. You mentioned a lot of things in that last response. I got to ask you though about the Bills season this year, the Bills versus Jets game that's coming, Monday Night Football. You mentioned your dad being a Jets fan, and he loved the Jets. This is quite the season opener then for you guys to be hosting. What are your thoughts on that game, and do you think that the Bills are going to earn that 2.5-point favorite, that they are going into New Jersey and Aaron Rodgers' debut as a New York Jet?
Well, they've seeded the clouds, haven't they, at 9/11 in New York for the most excitement that's been around the Jets in eons, right, with Aaron Rodgers, and legitimately so, because obviously they have more than him, and they have a really good defense. But again, to have them at a home game at Monday night in 9/11 New York, and here comes Buffalo, the team that's in their way, if you will. So it's one game. I don't mean to minimize it at all. And the Bills went out to L.A. when we didn't know the Rams weren't going to have a good season. They flattened the defending champs last year, right? And you don't ever go and win that game if you're the other team. I mean, you do 1 out of 5 maybe, right? So, but they did it in impressive fashion. So here's what I would say in the big picture, and then go back to the game, and then this will be on pod. We could either be right or wrong, but the one game, I mean, it's September 11th. It's still summer. I've read a lot in the off season by those who aren't really close to it, is the Bills' window closing. Well, I didn't know Josh became 42 years old, frankly. So, no, window closing, I don't even understand that thought. Oh, because they lost poorly to the Bengals last year? We know that, not to take anything away from Cincy, but you know better than me. You live there. I mean, the Bills are out of gas with everything from Damar to 7 feet of snow and playing 2 games in Detroit in 4 days when you're leaving your family and your 2-year-olds and behind, and shooting in the black market, black supermarket, in the black neighborhood in the summer. I mean, we could go on and on and on. They had enough. I mean, you could see it against Miami. They're only human. So I don't even count that as, well, this proves they're kind of losing their... I don't look at that at all. So I think they are still, other than the Chiefs, the best team in the conference and maybe the second best team in football, and we haven't played a game yet, as we're speaking. And if they will win the division, I believe, but the Jets are going to be very, very difficult. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is rejuvenated. We know how great he is. So this will be a tough task, but like I said, the Bills went out to L.A. and beat the Super Bowl champs on banner night. So they have a lot of the same players. I don't see that as being overwhelmed by the circumstance. In New York, it's kind of the Jets Super Bowl already, right? So, but it won't be the Bills Super Bowl. And the division's good. New England, Bill Belichick is the 4th place team in the division. The division's got to be pretty good, right, Nate? So, yeah. So if they lose, the sky isn't falling. I expect them to win the division when all is said and done, and we'll see where that puts them.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's incredible that, I mean, they might be in the best division in the entire league at this point with the way, like you said, Bill Belichick's 4th best in the AFC, and there's never, ever counting out a Bill Belichick-led team. I want to touch on a couple of other things before I let you go. Again, appreciate all your time in talking of this. Damar Hamlin was at the ESPYs this past summer, and it was a very emotional night. His speech, particularly when he did his narration there, and he provided the Pat Tillman Service Member of the Year award to the Bills training staff that saved his life that night against the Bengals in January. I just wanted one of the fondest memories I have of that night was seeing you stand up and clap. You were there live for that. What was it like to be there to see that? And were you as emotional as a lot of us Bills fans were, just seeing what had happened and his reaction to everything?
Absolutely. But whether you're a Bills fan or you're a fan of the human race, you had to be emotional for that. I mean, nobody was taking, the Bills, because the daily, news and then improvement and it hit closer to home on a daily basis, but everyone remembers right at that time, right after the holidays or still during the end of the holidays. And so if you were a human being and you have a pulse, you're emotional for that. The highlight for me, I don't know that I ever got to, because of the way it was, I will meet him when I get up there at some point in the fall, but I met the whole staff afterwards because they all went up, they wanted a picture, and they invited me in the picture, which was really cool. And I had nothing to do with it other than, I'm a Bills and a Buffalo supporter, but again, I've said it twice, if you're a human being and you didn't feel something, there's something wrong with you. That was amazing.
Yeah. Well put. So you mentioned earlier, some predictions for the Buffalo Bills. I have to ask you about the person that introduced us is Therese, also known as T. She's the founding member of the Water Buffalo Club of 716. You're now a member. If for anyone that hasn't seen what the Water Buffalo Club 716 is, it's those really cool Water Buffalo hats that you see like from the Flintstones, different colors, but there's always usually a red buffalo on it. How did you meet T, and how did that relationship form, and how did you become a member?
Well, I've known her as I have so many of that era with the Bills, so when I was 33, that was 1988, right? And so, therefore, as time went on with that team was all, maybe a couple were, were in their 30s, but most of those teams, players, Bruce Smith and Andre and Thermal and Steve Tasker, and we can go on and on and on, and Carol Talley, and et cetera. Not to mention Coach, and Bill Polian, who remain great friends. But the players were in their 20s mostly, so therefore I was kind of their age. And so as time went on, I went to a lot of games because Sunday is my job in the studio. But the Super Bowls, you started to meet folks. And then I don't know that I met Therese until, I met her once or twice before. At Buffalo function, I would play in the Jim's golf tournament, which I did again this year. A lot of us try to go and make sure we do that. She would be one of the organizers of it, she and others put on this wonderful event for all sorts of folks to have a good time, and food and drink and golf and laugh, and 27 holes being played and money going to charity, which is what we're there for. And so I met her as part of being a yearly participant in the golf tournament. And then, Jim went into the Hall of Fame just 5 years after he retired. So that was when, now we're all getting together again for another reason. So it was probably late 90s or early 2000s, around that time. But again, if you go to Jim's golf tournament 25 times or however many times I've gone, you're going to meet everyone who's involved with it in his life and Bill's life, kind of, and she was one of them, and she's just so positive. Buffalo, I mean, it's just, she bleeds it. As she tells me, when you ask somebody in Buffalo, you might meet on the street, where are you from? They don't say another town. They say what high school. So, what she does and has Buffalo at heart all the time, and the latest, the creation of these water buffalo hats that are hysterical. I mean, the Flintstones or the Honeymooners. I mean, it dates back to my youth. My God, maybe not in Bill's colors, but those things are actually really cool. I got mine here in the house. I do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. T is she's so fun. She's so nice. Everything you mentioned, through and through. Is there anything that you'd like to promote to the thousands of members of Bill's Mafia out there listening, or anything you'd like to say to them with the season, coming right up at the doorsteps?
Well, obviously, I don't have to tell the Bill's Mafia, which is the really the third generation. The fans who were at the rock pile really predate me. Fans a little bit of the 80s, which won when Knox was coach. I went to a game then, in the young 20s. I enjoyed it. They beat the Steelers. So the Bills Mafia, which is this generation's Bills hardcore, they don't need to be told to keep the faith. I mean, my God, nobody's telling anybody in Buffalo, keep the faith for your football team, whether they're the Super Bowl and it doesn't quite work, or whether it's a string of seasons that aren't very good. But next year approaches, because Buffalo, other than Green Bay, is the smallest town in the United States that has a football team. And it's kind of cool being the 31st market, if you will, but having a fervor that's as good as any other place. So not so much a promotion, because every year you think it's going to be the year, especially in this new regime, for good reason. And, the best, other than maybe Philly and San Francisco, we may have 7 of the best 9 teams maybe in the AFC. It's possible. So it's going to be a tough road no matter what they do. But I expect them to have another great season. And wouldn't it be pretty cool if Damar Hamlin was part of a Super Bowl championship team a year later? Just to put it in a nutshell, that'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, Poomer. That would be incredible. Well, listen, I definitely appreciate all the time you've given me. This has been one of the highlights of my podcasting career last 7 years. Not nearly as long as you sportscasting for sure, but this has been incredible. I know you're not from Buffalo, but I mean, I have so many good friends that are from Buffalo, that are in the Buffalo area, that I talk to on a daily basis, Bills Mafia members and listeners. And I mean, you're Buffalo through and through, Chris. I mean, it just feels like that. There's a certain Bills Mafia and Buffalo, city of Buffalo, has a way of not only being, city of good neighbors, but they can sniff out when someone's not genuine in the way that they act or the way that they talk or speak or whatever. And you're not that. You are genuine through and through, and I can just tell from this conversation, and it's more evidence to the fact. So I appreciate you taking the time out. I know you're a busy guy. I know you have a lot of things going on, but this has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Well, you're very kind. And listen, I don't know that I'm all of those things personally, but I do know that the people of Western New York are like that. I often try to explain the Midwest, and I say that as a real attaboy. The Midwest kind of begins in Western New York, and it's not really the Midwest. I get it, but the attitude of people. You guys are very loyal. You ask for very little, and you deliver a lot back. I mean, it's a two-way street, but the amount of driving coming back from Western New York to their neighbors and the Bills fans or not. You have to be hardy when you have winters like you did last year. Like you have to help one another. You have no choice, and there's a kind of a fun in doing it as long as there are some suffering too. But I'm going on and on and on. I don't give me credit. My love affair for the Western New York really comes from the love that was given back to me. I'll never forget it. So I also will never lose my love going that direction. So maybe maybe this is the year. But I'll tell you what, Nate, if it's not the year, maybe next year will be the year. How's that?
Yeah, I like it.
Well, we appreciate you being such a loyal fan and Charity, these Buffalo heads. Not too late to get one for the season, right? There's your commercial, right?
Exactly. Not too late. You can go to the Water Buffalo Club 716.com. You can get all of the hats there, and they're selling shirts now too, so be sure to check that out.
Enjoy the season. I think it's going to be fun.
Yes, I do too. I look forward to seeing it, and I'll look forward to watching you too.
Well, and keep doing the good work that you do.
I believe in Buffalo. I believe in the Buffalo way. The land of blue cheese and the red pinto. The town run by a mostly benevolent mafia. They come to you in friendship, unless you insult the family. And the family business? It's football. Everyone's working together to ensure this season ends with a celebration in Niagara Square. Oh, they pictured it so many times. The trophy, parade, the hazy halo, thousands of victory cigars outside City Hall. And they're still confident, even after all the heartbreak. Better days are coming. And with this Bills team, why wouldn't they be? It all starts with 17. Josh burst out of the scene with a what?
Jumps over a man at the
And then he followed it up with yet another what?
He's unbelievable.
Another naming streets and towns after him. But I mean, that's Buffalo. The town that bleeds blue and red, and good old Josh embodies what it means to be a Buffalo Bill. He's tougher than a $2 steak in Tonawanda. And he's got an arm reminiscent of my good friend Jim Kelly. He's everything the city waited for and more. Now he's a superstar, big enough to grace the cover of Madden, and he couldn't do it without Diggs.
Buffalo!
You know, there's an old saying in Buffalo, 17 plus 14 always equals 6. It's an elite combination that's led to not one, not two, but 3 straight AFC East titles. Diggs dances through defenses like he's got a one-night show at Shay's.
I'm him!
But the weapons go beyond Diggs. Last year, we saw flashes of T.O. with Gabe. He can run for Miles Davis. He could go all the way for a 98-yard TD against Pittsburgh. This year, the offense looks like it could go bananas with the DK brothers at tight end. And I can't wait to see the super freak, Rick James Cook. He could be cold-blooded in year 2. Of course, you can't talk about Sean McDermott's Bills without mentioning a defense that's strong enough to plow through 7 feet of snow. Speaking of 7, it's the 7th straight season of Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, appearing better than flats and drums. And you've got the homegrown all-pros, Matt Milano and Trey White, anchoring the defense like the USS Sullivan. But it's the future Hall of Famer, Von Miller, who's returning with some unfinished business to prove he's still the difference maker he was when he raised the Lombardi Trophy twice. And at the end of the day, that's the goal, right? All you gotta do is believe. And this city believes like no other, which is why I believe in Buffalo. And no one, I mean no one, deserves a championship like the Buffalo Bills.
Thank you again to Chris Berman for coming on and talking Bills with us. This was truly, truly an honor to have him on. I want to thank Therese from the Water Buffalo Club 716.com, where you can check out all the hats that they have. They have some Zubaz hats coming out very soon as well. Be sure to check out our preview podcast coming out very soon for the Bills-Jets game. Be sure to check out our post-game podcast that we do after every single game. Once again, this episode is brought to you by the TwinSpires Sportsbook at Del Lago, at the Del Lago Resort and Casino in Waterloo, New York, where every moment is a winning moment. So for me, Nate, nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. Go Bills.
Thank you for listening to the Circling the Wagons podcast. Download and subscribe to us in your favorite podcast service. Email us at ctwpod@gmail.com. That's Charlie Tango Whiskey Pod@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at CTWPod. And most importantly, go Bills!
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, Nate.
Well, listen, the whole show is called Circling the Wagons. Say no more. I love it.